adalah mata kuliah perilaku satwa liar. Nah, kali ini sejak tahun kemarin kita memiliki tamu Mas Ben ini, Benjamin Mirin dari Amerika Serikat, dari Universitas Cornell University, yang saat ini sedang menjalankan S3 bersama kami. Selamat datang Sugeng Rawuh, Mas Pujo, di acara ini. Saya dan Mas Pujo sekarang udah Prof ya, kali. Prof Pujo membantu membimbing di UGM atas penelitian Ben di Yogyakarta ini. Dan hari ini kita akan mendengarkan atau mengikuti presentasi dari Mas Ben ini terkait dengan penelitiannya, terkait dengan upaya konservasi untuk burung-burung yang diperdagangkan di Indonesia. Jadi nanti Ben akan banyak bercerita tentang pengalaman penelitiannya dan mengapa dia mengambil topik penelitian ini, dan dalam konteks nanti mata kuliah perilaku satwa liar ini juga nanti bagaimana materi berupa perilaku, kalau konteksnya perilaku berkicau, berkomunikasi di dalam oleh satwa ini kemudian dimanfaatkan manusia untuk menjadi salah satu aspek ya mungkin hobi atau kesenangan yang kemudian membawa dampak bagi konservasi. Saya kira saya tidak perlu berpanjang-panjang. Setelah ini saya dulu Mas Pujo ingin menyampaikan sesuatu. Oh, masih ambil. Oke, biar tidak berpanjang-panjang, saya persilahkan Ben untuk bisa menyampaikan materinya. Teman-teman bisa, kalau ingin mencoba bahasa Inggrisnya, boleh bertanya dalam bahasa Inggris, ataupun nanti bahasa Indonesia juga diperbolehkan. Yang belum bisa nanti, Ben belum bisa bahasa Jawa, jadi kalau bahasa Jawa jangan dulu lah. Oke, agar tidak terlalu panjang, saya persilakan Ben untuk bisa menyampaikan materinya. Nanti setelah Ben presentasi, baru kita melakukan diskusi. Harapannya nanti sekitar sampai jam 2 atau mungkin 2:15 kita akan selesai. Oke, saya persilakan Ben untuk bisa memulai presentasinya.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Pak dan selamat siang semua. Saya akan di-share screen sebentar. And for those of you who are from an international audience and do not speak Bahasa Indonesia, please note there is a link in the chat to the transcript, so you can see the complete talk in Bahasa Inggris, in English, so you can follow along. The slides are numbered. But since most of our audience is from Indonesia, saya akan terus dalam Bahasa Indonesia. Oke, jadi nama saya Benjamin Mirin dan saya adalah Visiting Research Fellow di UGM dan kandidat PhD di Cornell University yang berbasis di Cornell Lab of Mythology. Suatu kehormatan bagi saya untuk sharing penelitian yang mulai saya lakukan sejak September 2022 lalu, dan bagaimana peran suara alam dalam dunia konservasi menjadi penting dalam pekerjaan saya. Pengalaman saya untuk menjadi seorang peneliti berbeda dari kebanyakan orang. Sebelum memulai program PhD, saya telah menjadi bagian National Geographic Explorer dan DJ satwa liar dengan bermodalkan passion saya terhadap alam dan musik. Dan hal ini cukup unik dalam bidang ilmu pengetahuan dan konservasi. Pada kesempatan kali ini, saya akan menceritakan bagaimana prosesnya. Semuanya dimulai dari ketertarikan saya kepada The Songs of Nature. Saya mau bisa mendengar? Oke. Ini adalah video rekan saya, Tim Lehman dan Ed Scholes dari proyek burung cendrawasih. Proyek ini berbasis di lab ornithologi. Video ini menampilkan burung cendrawasih golden jantan, spesies yang biasa ditemukan pada kanopi tinggi yang memiliki vokal dan visual yang indah selama masih kawinnya. Mari kita dengarkan bersama. Kita dengarkan bersama.
Come on.
Suaranya kurang jelas kayaknya.
Bisa mendengar, Pak?
Kurang jelas, Ben.
Oh.
Ya tidak ada suaranya.
Saya akan share satu lagi. Satu kali lagi. Share sound. Ya, itu.
Come on.
Okay, let's watch that again. Okay. Cek. And bisa? Okay. Seperti yang Anda lihat, jantan dari spesies ini melakukan pertunjukan pacaran mereka dengan vokalisasi serta gerakan yang terkoordinasi dan sinkron. Dalam ilmu bioakustik, kami menganalisis sinyal seperti ini lewat spektrogram yang secara grafis merepresentasikan sinyal akustik lewat plot dengan waktu pada sumbu X dan frekuensi pada sumbu Y. Melalui metode tersebut, kita dapat mengidentifikasi perilaku satwa yang mungkin tidak kita dapatkan dari observasi langsung, sekaligus menjadi parameter kesehatan ekosistem. Mendeteksi sinyal seperti ini di hutan melalui pemantauan akustik aktif atau pasif dapat memberikan argumen kuat untuk melindungi alam liar. Ini menunjukkan adanya spesies langka atau terancam punah yang dapat kita gunakan sebagai argumen dalam perumusan kebijakan baru terkait perlindungan alam liar. Hal tersebut mengukur kelimpahan dan kekayaan spesies secara keseluruhan yang dapat berubah karena ekosistem terancam oleh perubahan iklim, hilangnya keanekaragaman hayati, dan perambahan manusia. Bahkan dapat digunakan untuk mendeteksi tekanan manusia seperti perburuan dan penggundulan hutan dengan menangkap suara gaji mesin, suara tembakan, suara manusia, dan hilangnya spesies indikator kesehatan hutan seperti burung dan serangga. Suara memberi kita cara berbeda untuk memperhatikan, memahami, dan menghargai alam. Dalam karir saya telah menggunakan kekuatannya untuk menginspirasi konservasi kepada kalian baru. Musik dan bioakustik adalah kombinasi alami, terutama jika Anda membuat musik dari alam itu sendiri. Semakin bersih rekamannya, semakin banyak yang bisa kita pelajari, dan semakin bagus terdengar. Ini adalah karya yang saya kumpulkan dari suara-suara alam dari Kalimantan.
When you live in the rainforests of Borneo, sometimes it can be hard to see your friends through the trees. So you have to make contact another way. You could fly up to the treetops and sing like a bird. That's a golden-whiskered barbet. Of course, this strategy is not unique to birds. Lots of primates use sound to survive, like this gibbon. And don't forget the orangutan. If we really listen to nature, we can bring all our voices together as one. party now. That's very much. Now move, move. Come on. Let's go.
Sebelum memulai PhD, saya membuat musik seperti ini di seluruh dunia, mengkoordinasi ekspedisi untuk mendokumentasikan suara langka di alam dan mengubahnya menjadi musik yang dikolaborasikan dengan seniman lokal, tujuannya untuk memberikan inspirasi dalam dunia konservasi alam. Sebagai bahasa universal, musik menjadi alat emansipatoris atau kebebasan, menjangkau audiens di luar ruang lingkup komunikasi sains tradisional dan mengangkat suara baru dalam diskusi tentang masa depan kolektif kita. Saya mengembangkan ide ini dengan membuat game komputer bernama Beastbox yang memungkinkan siapa saja membuat musik dari koleksi suara binatang yang saya kumpulkan. Melalui game ini, saya membagikan ide kepada dunia, sehingga siapapun dapat menjadi DJ sekuler dan menghargai alam melalui suara dan musik. Harapan saya, pengalaman kreatif ini dapat mendorong kaum muda untuk mengembangkan talenta dan bakat mereka dalam konservasi alam. Situasi urgen ini berasal dari pengalaman saya di ekosistem-ekosistem unik di seluruh dunia. Salah satunya ekspedisi ke Honduras. Bekerja sama dengan herpetologis Jonathan Kobe, pembuat film Katie Garrett, dan naturalis lokal Santiago Argueta, serta Miguel dan Ana Mejia. Pada tahun 2018, tim ini berangkat untuk merekam suara katak exquisite spike-thumbed frog, Latrohyla exquisita. Katak ini merupakan spesies endemik di hutan awan Taman Nasional di Kusuko di Honduras, dan karena mereka tidak hidup di tempat lain membuatnya sangat rentan terhadap ancaman perubahan iklim, penggundulan hutan, dan patogen bawaan manusia. Saat ini, status konservasinya adalah critically endangered, terancam punah. Suara merupakan alat penting bagi pelestarian katak-katak yang terancam punah. Para konservasionis memutar rekaman suara katak dalam program penangkaran guna memancing perilaku kompetitif katak dalam proses reproduksinya. Begitu juga dengan Latrohyla exquisita, tanpa rekamannya, kita tidak bisa mengkontrol perilaku dari katak tersebut. Saat kami tiba di Kusuko pada Mei 2018, kami menemukan kataknya berdiam di genangan Sungai Kusuko siang hari. Mengapa katak pohon nokturnal turun ke sungai di siang hari? Malam itu, kami menyusuri Sungai Kusuko dan meletakkan hidrofon di salah satu kolam tempat kami melihat katak. Begitu tiba di sana, saya mendengar suara ini. Itu merupakan bunyi klik mekanis yang konsisten. Berulang sebanyak 5 atau 6 kali. Setiap 5 hingga 10 detik. Tapi kami masih tidak begitu yakin dengan apa yang kami dengarkan. Tapi Miguelito meraih bahu saya dan menunjuk, "Mira, larangan está aquí." Katak itu ada di sini. Saya berbalik badan dan melihat katak tersebut berenang di air dan saya mendengar bunyi klik. Katak tersebut lalu menempel pada kaki tripod dan mulai memanjat. Dan saat meninggalkan air suaranya berhenti. Kami terpukau. Kami mendengar suara plektor hal eksquisita untuk pertama kalinya. Dan suara tersebut berasal dari dalam air. Sebagai peneliti, kami harus skeptis. Sehingga kami terus melakukan percobaan untuk memverifikasi identitas suara ini. Meski begitu, penemuan seperti ini sangat seru. Rekaman kami merupakan hal baru dalam sains dan menangkap detail baru tentang kehidupan dan perilaku spesies yang terancam punah. Spesies katak lain diketahui berkomunikasi di bawah air untuk menghindari gangguan akustik dari suara-suara di sekitarnya. Jika suara ini merupakan suara plectrohala exquisita, maka pemutaran rekaman suara tersebut dapat digunakan untuk menyelamatkan populasinya dari kepunuhan. Sejak penemuan ini, saya menyadari bahwa saya ingin sains menjadi inti dari pekerjaan saya. Hal tersebut telah menghelami saya untuk memproduksi film independen, buku yang ditulis bersama dengan masyarakat adat, dan bahkan serial web saya sendiri, Wild Beats di National Geographic, yang ditayangkan di televisi beberapa tahun yang lalu. Dan itulah yang membawa saya ke Cornell untuk memulai PhD dan ke Indonesia untuk melakukan penelitian. Tujuan saya berkecimpung dengan media adalah menghidupkan suara-suara ini, sehingga audiens saya dapat memahami topik ini lebih dalam dan merasakannya melalui berbagai dimensi. Pada dasarnya, kita tidak bisa melindungi apa yang tidak kita cintai. Dan kita tidak bisa mencintai apa yang tidak kita pahami. Sekarang, Anda tahu bahwa saya suka suara burung. Di seluruh Indonesia, terdapat banyak orang dengan kesenangan yang sama, tetapi memahaminya dengan cara yang sangat berbeda. Mari kita kupas apa yang baru saja kita lihat dan dengar. Puluhan pria Jawa menonton dan bersiul menyemangati sekelompok burung kacamata gunung dalam lomba burung kicau tradisional. Saat burung bernyanyi secara naluri di hadapan satu sama lain, sekelompok juri berjalan di bawah menilai penampilan masing-masing burung berdasarkan suara, repertoire, bulu, dan gerakan. Banyak dari burung ini telah diburu dari alam liar dan dilatih bernyanyi sebagai hiburan manusia. Tunggu menggelegar menyaksikan burung-burung kicau ulung tampil di dalam sangkar. Tetapi bagi para pria yang berkumpul di sini, acara tersebut merupakan kesempatan untuk berkumpul, terhubung dengan alam, dan menumbuhkan rasa kejantanan yang murni berdasarkan waktu luang dan komunitas. Orang mengatakan ada 5 syarat utama untuk menjadi laki-laki dalam budaya tradisional Jawa. Rumah, istri, pekerjaan, kuda atau sekarang mobil, dan burung. Komponen terakhir, yakni burung, menghubungkan pria dengan sisi sensitifnya, mengalihkan perhatiannya dari kerja keras sehari-hari, dan pada akhirnya membuatnya lebih tenteram. Sebagai hasilnya, terjadi benturan peradaban sebab kicauan burung yang awal dibentuk untuk bertahan hidup, bertransformasi menjadi alat sosialisasi antara manusia dan burung. Sejak pertengahan tahun 70-an, kontes burung kicau telah mendorong perdagangan global. Baik burung kicau yang ditangkap di alam maupun yang ditangkarkan. Saat ini kontes berlangsung di setidaknya 25 negara dan permintaan untuk burung baru pun membuka jalan internasional untuk perdagangan satwa liar secara legal dan ilegal. Tidak ada kontes yang lebih menonjol daripada di Indonesia, di mana kemenangan membawa prestise sosial dan dalam beberapa kasus, hadiah uang dalam jumlah besar hingga sebesar gaji selama 10 tahun. Fenomena tersebut menciptakan siklus yang terus-menerus berlangsung dan meningkatkan permintaan akan burung kicau. Saya datang ke Indonesia untuk mempelajari fenomena ini dan bekerja sama dengan sekolah dan LSM lokal untuk membuat cerita dan media pendidikan sehingga bisa menyaksikan keindahan dari burung tanpa sangkar. Penelitian saya telah menunjukkan bahwa kita perlu lebih mempelajari hal-hal tentang peran pendidikan dalam melindungi burung kicau di Asia Tenggara. Grafik ini menunjukkan hasil dari tinjauan literatur atau literature review global yang saya tulis tentang perdagangan burung kicau dari 30 tahun terakhir. Dari 219 manuskrip yang ditinjau, wilayah Indo-Melayu menghasilkan publikasi paling banyak. Kami mengkategorikan publikasi menurut daftar prioritas untuk penelitian konservasi yang dirilis pada Asian Songbird Trade Crisis Summit tahun 2015. Di antaranya, genetika, biologi lapangan, dan ekologi yang paling baik terwakili di 3 wilayah dengan publikasi terbanyak. Namun, dari semua kategori penelitian, pendidikan merupakan yang paling sedikit terwakili secara global, dengan hanya 17 publikasi peer review. Pada saat yang sama, kami menemukan 5 spesies dan 1 famili yang dirujuk lebih dari yang lain untuk digunakan dalam kontes burung kicau. Dan 5 di antaranya ditemukan di wilayah Indo-Melayu. Sebagian besar sudah mengalami penurunan populasi di alam liar menurut daftar merah IUCN. Perlu dicatat bahwa kontes burung kicau sering kali tidak terlihat oleh para peneliti. Dan burung yang populer berubah dari tahun ke tahun, sehingga gambaran penggunaan spesies ini masih awal. Namun, terlepas dari penurunan ini, pertaruhan finansial dan budaya yang tinggi terus mendorong pemeliharaan burung dan mendorong pedagang untuk memburu lebih banyak spesies tanpa peduli dengan status konservasinya. Selain itu, makna pribadi yang kuat yang diangkat berasal dari pemeliharaan burung di kalangan orang Jawa membuatnya menjadi tradisi yang terjalin dengan identitas pribadi. Pemeliharaan burung sering kali diwariskan dari ayah ke anak laki-lakinya, tertanam sebagai jati diri dari seorang pria. Dorongan untuk memelihara burung ini begitu kuat sehingga hutan di Indonesia menjadi sunyi senyap. Para peneliti di belahan dunia menyebutnya Silent Forest Syndrome. Dan di sini di Jawa, banyak hutan dan bahkan taman nasional terancam akibat sindrom ini. Namun kenyataannya, hal tersebut tidak menghentikan perdagangan burung kicau, melainkan mengalihkan fenomena tersebut ke lokasi baru atau spesies baru. Alhasil, populasi burung liar semakin menurun. Akibat tekanan dari hilangnya habitat fragmentasi, 43 spesies menghadapi ancaman kepunahan yang disebabkan oleh perdagangan satwa liar di Asia Tenggara. Dengan kondisi kesenjangan dalam literatur dan terus menurunnya populasi burung di Indonesia, kami berusaha mendalami bagaimana pendidikan dapat berdampak lebih baik bagi masa depan. Tidak hanya untuk burung, tapi juga bagi kita sebagai manusia. Kontes suara burung telah menggakar kuat di berbagai budaya di planet ini. Memberi tekanan pada populasi burung liar, para konservasionis menyadari bahwa praktik tersebut bernilai budaya, ekonomi, dan sosial yang besar bagi mereka yang berpartisipasi di dalamnya. Oleh karena itu, kita perlu fokus pada manusia dan alam itu sendiri. Pendidikan alam bisa membawa kita ke sana. Kami juga dapat memajukan misi ini dengan menuruti strategi berbasis masyarakat dan menunjukkan perluasan perdagangan bukanlah satu-satunya solusi ketika populasi lokal burung berkurang atau bahkan punah. Saya telah melihat beberapa contohnya di desa-desa di Jawa Tengah, di mana para pemburu burung telah menjadi pelestari lingkungan. Orang-orang beternak burung dalam skala industri dan memiliki sumber pendapatan alternatif seperti beternak kambing telah memberikan pendapatan penting tanpa adanya perburuan burung. Banyak dari pelajaran ini muncul melalui relasi saya dengan peneliti lokal dan para pemangku kepentingan atau stakeholder. Salah satunya adalah Yayasan Kanopi, sebuah LSM lingkungan yang berbasis di Yogyakarta yang berfokus pada konservasi berbasis masyarakat. Mereka juga bekerja dengan para peneliti. Saya juga bekerja dengan para peneliti dari UGM, dan ITB, dan guru-guru di sekolah negeri di Yogyakarta. Kolaborasi kami telah berjalan dalam 2 fase. Fase 1 dari bulan September lalu hingga Januari lalu, kami memberikan penilaian dasar tentang hubungan dan perspektif siswa terhadap burung kicau. Data ini memberi kami gambaran tentang cara membuat dan menguji kurikulum di fase 2. Kurikulum ini berfokus pada burung kicau yang diperdagangkan dengan tujuan memberdayakan siswa untuk membuat keputusan yang tepat apakah mereka akan berpartisipasi dalam perdagangan burung kicau dan bagaimana mereka dapat membuat tradisi ini lebih berkelanjutan. Berikut adalah proses dan hasil penelitian ini. Fase pertama adalah etnografi berbasis mahasiswa, di mana kami merekrut 9 mahasiswa sarjana dari seluruh Yogyakarta, melatih mereka menggunakan kamera dan mikrofon, serta melakukan wawancara. Dengan bantuan dari Yayasan Kanopi, kami menjalin hubungan dengan orang-orang di berbagai tahapan perjalanan burung kicau yang diperdagangkan dari hutan hingga ke panggung kompetisi. Kami berbicara dengan ahli konservasi dan pengamat burung serta pemburu yang bekerja di hutan yang sama. Kami mengikuti jalan menuju pasar burung dan berbicara dengan penjual di pasar burung pasti, serta pelatih yang memanen burung liar untuk membantu melatih burung lain cara berkicau yang biasa disebut burung masteran. Kami bertemu dengan penangkar dan penjual burung yang stoknya dimulai dengan burung liar dan sejak itu berkembang menjadi populasi penangkaran yang berdiri sendiri. Dan akhirnya kami berbicara dengan pemelihara burung di kontes burung kicau, di mana burung yang diperdagangkan memulai debutnya dan membuktikan nilainya. Berikut adalah sedangkan proses kunjungan lapangan kami. Please read the slides and follow the images from me and my student. Next.
Ya dulu cuma yang ngajarin mikat itu malah Pak RW yang ngajarin, yang Pak RW sekarang itu yang ngajarin mikat dulu. Terus ikut-ikutan cari, pas ya itu kok kayaknya mudah, kayaknya enak gitu, dapat uang. Nanti ya lokasinya nanti.
Welcome to New Rixing. The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
Cepet nggak usil cepet. Alah, cici. Kerak basi, Cuk. Sini dulu. Ngomong kenceng. Yang dua lepas. Diculkis. Oke. Sampai.
Para mahasiswa merupakan inti dari penelitian ini. Mereka menjalani setiap proses dengan tekun dan gigih hingga mereka menghasilkan lebih dari 10.000 foto, 1.500 rekaman suara, dan 24 wawancara di 18 lokasi lapangan. Mereka juga mencatat dan membuat katalog seluruh arsip ini. Kemudian mereka menggabungkan gambar dan rekaman favorit mereka menjadi potret bernuansa konservasi yang berfokus pada manusia dan juga burung. Mahasiswa kami menampilkan karyanya di UGM pada Januari yang lalu sebagai contoh bagaimana memulai upaya baru dalam konservasi burung kicau. Alih-alih menekankan perbedaan antara pemeliharaan burung dan konservasi, mereka menganjurkan keterlibatan masyarakat dan mencari titik temu yang berakar pada kecintaan kita terhadap burung. Seperti yang mereka katakan, we hope this becomes a starting point for people to discuss together, not just conservationists with conservationists and traders with traders, but a place where representatives from all communities can come together and explore how we can achieve coexistence together in the long term. Ada beberapa cara kita dapat mencapai visi tersebut. Pertama, kita harus menganalisis apa yang kita miliki secara lebih mendalam. Kumpulan media ini menunjukkan bagaimana generasi penerus memandang, menafsirkan dan mengkritisi pertanyaan tentang pemelihara burung dan konservasi burung kicau. Melalui analisis kualitatif, kita dapat menganalisis media untuk mendeskripsikan satu, bagaimana persepsi dan bias mahasiswa terhadap konservasi berubah selama pengalaman mereka di lapangan. Dua, jenis sumber informasi apa yang mereka fokuskan. Dan tiga, bagaimana mereka menunjukkan pemikiran kritis. Dikombinasikan dengan analisis naratif, kami dapat menyajikan metode tersebut sebagai jalur baru keterlibatan mahasiswa dalam penyelesaian masalah lingkungan. Dokumentasi mahasiswa ini juga bukan sekadar arsip. Koleksi ini berisi pengetahuan yang dapat diperkenalkan kepada khalayak umum dengan pendidikan. Untuk mendalami hal ini, saya dan mahasiswa saya membuat kurikulum berdasarkan media dan pengalaman lapangan kami yang berjudul Songs of Conservation. Kurikulum tersebut menargetkan siswa-siswi SMA di Yogyakarta. Kami sedang berkolaborasi dengan guru di 4 sekolah. Setiap sekolah diwakili oleh satu kelas yang masing-masing terdiri dari 36 siswa pada jenjang kelas 10 dan 11 IPA. Kami sedang mengukur pengetahuan, sikap dan perilaku mereka terhadap burung kicau sebelum dan sesudah kurikulum berlangsung. Dan kami berencana untuk mengumpulkan data putaran terakhir pada November 2023 untuk menganggap perubahan komponen-komponen yang diukur pada siswa-siswa tersebut. Kami memilih sekolah berdasarkan kedekatannya dengan pasar burung dan kontes burung kicau pada Google Maps dan menggunakan pengambilan sampel snowball sampling untuk membangun hubungan dan memilih mitra kami. Kami memiliki 2 sekolah di Kota Yogyakarta, 1 di Kabupaten Bantul, dan 1 sekolah di Kabupaten Sleman. Kurikulum ini sedang berlangsung selama 4 sesi, dengan tambahan pertemuan sebelum dan sesudah pengumpulan data. Kami merekrut asisten guru dari komunitas dan dari kelompok etnografi kami dalam proses penerapan kurikulum ini. Kami sedang mempresentasikan materi kami dalam campuran bahasa Indonesia dan Inggris, membantu siswa meningkatkan keterampilan bahasa mereka dengan proyek berbicara dan menulis di depan umum, dan melakukan kegiatan praktik dan penelitian untuk memperkuat pemikiran kritis mereka. Ketika kami selesai mengumpulkan data tentang perubahan pengetahuan, sikap, dan perilaku siswa, kami selanjutnya menganalisis korelasi antara perubahan tersebut dan variabel demografis tertentu. Ini termasuk pendapatan orang tua, jenis kelamin, dan kedekatan siswa terhadap pemeliharaan burung. Tujuan kami adalah untuk mengidentifikasi siswa seperti apa yang mungkin paling setuju untuk membuat perubahan ramah lingkungan dalam hidup mereka, sehingga kami dapat membantu para konservasionis memfokuskan pendidikan masa depan para siswa dan mengoptimalkan potensi positif dalam diri pemuda-pemuda dan remaja terhadap kelestarian alam. Setiap kali saya berdiri di depan ruang kelas, saya diingatkan bahwa tempatnya bisa 2 arah. Mengajar suatu mata pelajaran mungkin merupakan tanda penguasaan terhadap materi pelajaran tersebut, tetapi jika kita mendorong siswa untuk berpikir kritis, mereka akan mengajukan pertanyaan yang tidak pernah kita bayangkan. Meski dengan ribuan foto, suara, dan transkrip wawancara, tim kami masih berada di langkah awal investigasi perdagangan burung kicau di Yogyakarta. Untuk menyelesaikan penelitian ini, kami akan mengundang mahasiswa kami untuk menjadi rekan penulis dan membuat etnografi akhir yang berfokus pada pertanyaan yang mereka ajukan selama proses dokumentasi berlangsung. Saat ini, kami sedang menyelidiki berbagai celah dalam cerita kami. Hingga Juni 2023, kami berencana untuk melakukan 10 sampai 2 wawancara tambahan guna menggabungkan penemuan mahasiswa kami dengan penemuan kami sendiri. Dan tim saya sudah menyelesaikan 13 wawancara. Dari penelitian ini, kami akan merumuskan solusi berbasis masyarakat untuk mendorong pemeliharaan burung yang lebih berkelanjutan. Kami telah mengungkap beberapa ide dan mungkin akan mengungkap lebih banyak lagi. Tujuan kami adalah terus menggali lalu mengidentifikasi poin-poin kesepakatan dan kolaborasi antara pemelihara burung dan konservasionis sehingga kami bisa memberikannya kepada masyarakat dunia. Memelihara burung merupakan tradisi di berbagai belahan bumi. Karena populasi burung liar terancam, kita harus ingat bahwa ini adalah tantangan manusia. Kami berharap lewat cerita hubungan manusia burung dari Indonesia akan membantu kalian umum untuk lebih inklusif guna mencapai keberhasilan konservasi berbasis masyarakat, sehingga Indonesia bisa menjadi sumber solusi bagi masa depan. Setelah hampir seumur hidup mempelajari burung, saya tidak pernah membayangkan bahwa jutaan orang akan mempertahankan burung-burung kicau sebagai komoditas, sebagai simbol kekayaan status sosial, atau bagian dari identitas mereka. Tetapi kompromi yang sebenarnya tidak mengizinkan adanya asumsi-asumsi yang berlebihan. Kita dapat mempelajari nyanyi burung untuk memahami alam atau untuk memenangkan kontes burung kicau. Tetapi bagaimana kita bisa hidup berdampingan merupakan pertanyaan yang harus kita putuskan bersama. Demi kita dan buruh. Saya ingin berterima kasih kepada semua pihak yang telah membantu saya dalam penelitian dan karir ini, pada khususnya UGM dan Cornell dan Fulbright Indonesia dan Cornell Lab of Ornithology juga. Pada khususnya terima kasih untuk tim saya di Indonesia atas bantuan dan keyakinan mereka dalam keseluruhan proses penelitian. Pak Muhammad Ali Imron dari Fakultas Kehutanan dan Pak Pujo Semedi dari Fakultas Ilmu Budaya di UGM, dan selanjutnya Mbak Ayu Ratri Pratiwi dan Mas Fahmi Idris Firdaus. Terima kasih juga untuk komite akademik saya di Cornell, Princeton, dan Oxford, yang termasuk Dr. Shorna Allred, Dr. David Wilco, Dr. Andrew Gosler, Dr. Michelle Smith, dan pada akhirnya my chair, Dr. Holger Klink. Sebagai penutup, saya ucapkan terima kasih atas waktunya dan perhatiannya. Jika kita dapat melanjutkan diskusi dalam bahasa Inggris, saya dengan senang hati akan menjawab pertanyaan dari hadirin. Terima kasih banyak semuanya.
Oke, terima kasih Ben. Applause untuk Ben. Menarik sekali hasil penelitiannya. We have question in the chat room. Probably you may check it. Probably I would like to invite Evaluation. Will you mind to comment directly, and then later on I will also invite Jeffrey and also Sekar for their raising hand. So please,
Sure.
Evaluation, will you speak out?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's early morning here. I really enjoyed your presentation and I found it interesting. I see it is something that, yes, it's a good way to encourage the younger ones or the people in the community about the need to conserve the species that are being endangered in the community. But I was wondering, I asked the question, if you have tried playing this sound in the forest and see whether it attracts the species that really have that sound. Have you seen such a thing happen?
Yes,
That's
thank
my
you so much.
question.
Thank you so much for the question, Boo, and it's nice to see you. I have done a number of art residencies in places like national parks and zoos, and the New York Botanical Garden. And whenever I perform outside, the birds always come in to take a look. But I'm sure many of us here in this room can appreciate how perhaps playing back the sounds of an ecosystem to that ecosystem can elicit a lot of stressed out behaviors. Sometimes if you're playing territorial sounds, the birds will respond aggressively. So I think it's important to be careful with sound. Has so much power for us and for nature that even when it's mixed into a musical form, sharing it must be done with a light touch. But it's still quite interesting. I think the most powerful interaction I've had is with the communities where I perform this music and where many of my collaborators come from. I've had a lot of privileged opportunities to work with various indigenous and local artists, and I'm just a guest in these places. But when I get to share the music I've made during my visit to a place and see the community respond with so much excitement, my favorite moment is telling them, these are your sounds. These are from your backyard,
Yes.
and your home is worth protecting. And this is just, that's
I hope we have something to collaborate on Nigerian animal species. Though I'm not a wildlife person, I am a farm animal person. Yeah, I also want to ask, because I have been doing some research on the use of playback sounds, though it's not as thick as what you have, but we just record the sounds of the bird, maybe whether they are exposed to predator or where the calls they make. I'm talking about chickens now. The calls they make when they have access to food or predator. So we record it and play it back to chicks that never had maybe mothers, and see if they will be able to interpret the sound and take the right behavioral response or a strategy during that. That is what I have been doing, which I find interesting. And I think with this, combining it as a music and could be one of the best way of bringing enrichment into the poultry industry, where you have thousands of chicks that are hatched, without mothers, and having this sound being played to them in different way or different formats, which one may need to research on, would be a means of making them feel like everything is okay. They are not suffering from not having mothers. So I would like to discuss with you further on this. Thank you.
Sure. Interesting idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And secondly, I would like to invite Saiful. You may speak in Bahasa.
I can use English anyway.
Okay, good.
So thank you very much for Pen Mirin. So this is a very interesting kind of topic, because I also love about birds and also nature and the relationship between nature and non-human being. Well, I have two questions actually. I'm interested in knowing further about your curriculum that is applied in the schools, and how you design the curriculum, and what are the activities that you've been implementing in this curriculum, so that we can have kind of ideas when we want to propagate these ideas into other schools, so we can kind of have ideas about that. That's the first one. Can you get the point of what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay. The second point is that this is kind of a tricky questions, yet I'm interested in a way of capturing the sound of birds and then making it into music. And then, yeah, that's very wonderful. But I'm also thinking, would it be also take disadvantage for the populations of the birds? What I mean is that when the community already know the sound of the bird that already recorded by the music, and then they played in the open space or in the forest, and then the music invite all the birds, and then the community catch the bird. So even the populations become lesser due to the exposures of the music that already found, and the community use that music like blatantly or negatively for the sake of the community benefits or well-being, not for the sake of the bird's intrinsic value. So that the possible dark sides of this music-related method or strategy in conservations. And I would like to discuss further what you think of this issue. Thank you.
They're both great questions. I'll start with the second one, if that's okay, because I worried about that myself. My background as an artist and an educator and a performer is designed to celebrate nature. But of course, we have many people who celebrate nature in a different way, using things like cages. And so, sure, I've actually talked to some colleagues about whether this anthem to nature could become an anthem to just catching more birds and celebrating the birds in the cages. I mean, when you're an artist and you release your work into the world, you can't really control how it's used. That's the challenge. That's the beauty. But one thing I've noticed is that many of the people I have the good fortune of collaborating with in my work are really very thoughtful and do a very careful job to become community stewards of their nature in their backyard. And I would say it's about trust. We have to share this work in among networks of people who share a common vision. And whenever I'm a guest in a place that's not my native country or even my hometown, I always lean on the support of local informants and stakeholders who can help guide this question because it's a really important one. And you're absolutely right. If we're not careful about how we share this material, it can be used in ways that we may consider wrong, or that we're trying to resist. But I think if you go, even in my experiences so far in Yogyakarta, when I speak with bird keepers who are supposedly on the other side, that division breaks down. And when you focus on starting with a shared love of birds, a shared love of nature, no matter how you express that, the seeds of conservation can be planted in common ground. And conservation becomes a strategy that we co-own and co-create. So I think that it's not a one-step or one answer type of problem. It's different every single time. And so that's why I love my work, because I'm always a student of many teachers and mentors around the world. Your other question about the curriculum, I'm very happy to share. So we've been meeting with the teachers at these 4 schools. And before we started teaching, we asked them a little bit about how they like to teach, what subjects are in their curriculums. They're public schools, so fortunately the curriculum is standardized. But on the flip side, that means you have to make a curriculum that is a natural fit. You can't come in and teach something that's, has a lot of wow factor and then say, okay, bye, see ya. Because how is that sustainable? How can that achieve scale? So right now we are working with the teachers to design these activities. And so far, we also worked with the students from my ethnography portion of the research. We are taking the students outside to listen to the sounds on campus and introducing them to concepts of biodiversity through sound. So listening to anthropogenic or human sounds, geological sounds, and biological sounds. And then they go home and they record that, the same type of thing at their house and bring it back to share the next session. We're presenting a lot of information about the bird trade. And we're also having them conduct a role play exercise where I, with my teachers, share these different, like I mentioned in my presentation, how we meet the hunters, the conservationists, the sellers, and the contestants in the competitions. We introduce all these characters through a narrative to the students, and then they research them. And right now, they're writing essays for homework. So I'm so excited because this Friday, we will receive our first batch of essays and start working on presentations with the students. So it's a first trial phase, but we're going to share this curriculum with the teachers when we're finished as part of a packet so that they still can use the resource if they want. And that's the idea, we don't own this. This is supposed to be a community tool.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I hope that you publish your work so that I can see further the results. And
Absolutely.
please share it if possible, because I would like to learn further about the coexistence of birds and humans. So thank you very
so
much
much
for sharing your work. Wonderful.
Yeah, appreciate the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Saiful. And I would like to invite Scott. She raised
Yep.
her hand. Yes, please.
Yep, thank you, Pak Imron. Wonderful work, Ben. Apart from the language, I imagine like what kind of challenge that you faced so far during your field work.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering how do you guarantee that this unique curriculum can be sustained in the future in Indonesian ecosystems? Thank you. I just want your opinion. Yeah.
Sure. Well, to be honest, we still are not 100% certain what will happen because we're teaching right now. And our next step is to publish academic research about the impact of the curriculum. We'll keep collecting data until the end of the year and doing analysis. But we're also going to share these packets with the teachers that include the PowerPoints, some of the media from our archive. And this is a step-by-step process. So I think first things first, we have to just, these teachers are really busy. We have to respect their schedule, their workload, and the professional standards that they have to meet with their jobs. So coming to them and saying, okay, we have this packet. Is this useful for you? And just asking them. And if they say, I can't really use this, then we can learn from that. And we can say, okay, well, what could we give you that might be helpful? That's part of why we taught the class in a mixture of Bahasa Indonesia and Bahasa Inggris, is because there was the added motivation of improving spoken and written English. So we're trying to meet a lot of different student needs. As far as how it can be scaled and preserved in the long term, we have this massive archive of media. And to the previous student's point, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name now, but sharing this media is a sensitive thing because media has a lot of power, and it can be used in ways that are deleterious to the environment, that can cause damage. But one idea that I'm considering is putting this archive on the cloud and making it accessible through a network to teachers. So if they wanted to draw from the archive and use the materials in their classrooms, they could do so. That's a longer term goal. We're also exploring ways of creating a photo exhibit here in Gadjah so that we can share our students' work in a public space. And the intention with that project would be to bring all the narasumber together from this story that we've told, so they can meet each other and we can discuss these community-based ideas as one group rather than two. So I think the sustainability comes down to listening to teachers and listening to the community and being as generous as possible with the tools that we have.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Sekar. Ben, we have also Kamran who wrote a question in the chat room. I would like to invite Kamran Khan. Kamran and also Panji.
Yeah.
You may ask directly. Maybe Kamran first.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pak Imron, for giving me the time to ask the question from Mr. Ben. Mr. Ben, welcome to Indonesia. Sorry we couldn't meet you. Actually, I have sent my 2 questions in the chat box.
Huh? So what are the main methods and techniques employed by community-led conservation projects aiming to control the trade of songbird sustainability in Indonesia? And how have these programs been effective in conserving songbird populations while simultaneously enhancing the standard of living for nearby communities? Wow, that is that's many questions in one. But let's do it. So the techniques, I mean, it would be a very long answer for me to summarize all the techniques that I've learned about, but there's a huge diversity of topic areas within songbird conservation and trade. In my presentation, I mentioned the Asian Songbird Trade Crisis Summit and how there was a lack of educational research material. But let's not forget, there are 4 other categories of research, and all of them have dozens, if not hundreds, of researchers and conservationists working together to push these ideas forward. Everything from seizing birds that are being smuggled in trade and releasing them in the wild, to education programs like mine, to genetic studies of captive populations, rehabilitation and release. All of these ideas form a constellation of ideas and solutions. And the only way we can succeed is if we communicate among these silos, among these groups. I think it can be challenging sometimes because all of this work is so specialized. And as academics, we work in a space where you get a PhD, you focus on one thing for many years, and that is now your area of expertise. But the magic happens when you reach out to someone who knows something that you don't. And then you can really make a lot of progress together. In the second part of that question, you ask about enhancing the standard of living for nearby communities, and that is so important. That's part of why we have to leave our assumptions at the door. When we approach people who are in the bird keeping community, for example, it's not just their identity, it's often their livelihood that's involved in breeding these birds, catching these birds. It can be good money. And so you have to try to develop solutions with community input. I've seen some really interesting solutions in villages in central Java, like Tlogoguo, and many of you probably know Jatimulyo is a good example of former bird hunters becoming conservationists, tour guides for ecotourism, and nest adoption programs, things of that sort. It's amazing how smoothly some of these skills can transfer. One good example is if you're a hunter, you're really good at finding birds. But that's also a very valuable skill if you are taking a bunch of photographers to the forest so they can see birds face to face. The same is true among captive bird breeders in some of these national breeding organizations. You know, they do it for a commercial purpose, but they're really good at breeding these birds. You know, do we always agree on the methods? No. Do we always agree on the purpose? No. But the techniques are there. And so there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration that makes the community part of the new strategy. I know there are also a lot of really good projects happening in West Kalimantan and Pontianak. In particular, the NGO Planet Indonesia is doing some great work where they are providing alternate sources of livelihood for these villages that so far have relied on poaching, but are now looking for new opportunities to shift their agenda elsewhere. And as we lose more birds in the wild, this becomes a problem, not just because we lose biodiversity, but the resource runs out. So it's in everyone's interest to try to find these community solutions. I see there's a second question here. Imron, how are we with time? Because I know I asked you for time until 2 p.m. I don't want to disrupt your agenda. I'm happy to keep going, but just wanted
Yeah,
to
I think no problem. I still have till 2:30, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, let's stick until 2:15 probably.
Yeah, that sounds good. So what effective community-led conservation efforts in Indonesia use sustainable trading methods for songbirds? And what can we learn from them? So that is what we're investigating right now. I mentioned the transition from hunting to ecotourism, and the transition from breeding for captive breeding and singing contests to conservation breeding. And I think while I'm still uncovering the details with my team, the main lesson that can be learned from all this is that we're not so different. I watched birds in the wild for 30 years. I never imagined that a bird could be traded and sold like a piece of property, or at least for its song in this way. But if it awakens something deeply human, empathic, emotionally connected, and sometimes destructive and violent in all of us. If you look at the shared history of bird keeping across national frontiers, it's not just Indonesia where this is causing local extinctions. That happens all over the world. And countries like mine, the United States, have their own history of causing a lot of environmental damage for the sake of development or livelihoods and economic growth. So it's not as if this is an isolated issue. This is something that is a human issue. And when I say human, I don't mean just the people who do it now. I mean everybody, because we share this earth with lots of different taxonomic groups of living things. And unless we remember that we have more in common than we do that separates us, I don't think we're going to find those solutions that exist between industries and between cultures. And considering how much space we share with birds in this world, we need to find that common ground. That really needs to be the objective. So that would be my general answer to the examples of effective community-led conservation, is remembering that we have common ground. The examples of breeding for conservation and for trade, looking for birds, switching from hunting to ecotourism and nest adoption. But there are others that we're also exploring. And I look forward to sharing those as part of my forthcoming publication.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Vin, for your massive response and briefly answering my question. Nice to meet you and wish you best of luck for your study. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you very much.
Thanks, Kamran.
Yeah,
We have
welcome.
still two questions. Ben, Panji is looking for potential use of your curricula in the future. Panji, would
Yeah.
you please ask directly?
Okay, I hope my microphone is good enough.
Yep, sounds
Hear me
good.
okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll just try to be brief. The questions right in the chat room, so I'm just curious about how they react to your curriculum so far, because it's something that we rarely address in the formal class setting in public school. So, and also like I'm more curious about the second questions about do you think it's worth it to actually continue to work in the school after you've done your research? Maybe like some organization from Jogja can carry on doing work with the students, with the network you have in buildings, and because we used to have a birding club in a high school in Yogyakarta, and that's where my interest to birds actually come from. Do you think it's a good idea to carry on? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Panji, for the question. And if I can be as honest as possible, it's never 100% clear. I deeply believe in this research, and I would say it's absolutely worth it to carry on, but that's mainly so that we can learn what kind of impact we have. You know, as I know you've done a lot of work in this space, Mas, and so there isn't a lot that we have learned from so far because integrating it into public schools is really challenging. But I always say, if there's a new path that we can take to try to achieve something new, then it's worth at least trying it. And I'll be curious to see how the teachers react to the curriculum when it's finished. And I think I'll really have to wait to answer that question completely until we've gotten to the end of the process. I will say one more thing though. It's easy to treat environmental education as sort of this way of grooming people to think a certain way. But really, the classroom's like a laboratory. And it's a vulnerable place where you can do a lot of experimental learning and hands-on learning, and people can make mistakes and it's okay. And you can trust students with information that might be controversial. We've presented to them about how to take good care of a bird in a cage. We're not necessarily telling them this is right and this is wrong. We're giving them the information to make a conscious choice to make it a sustainable practice, no matter which way they go. We're trying to not be moral about it, but just give them information. And I've seen this through my work in television, in the classroom, on stage. If you set the bar high, people will rise to the occasion. I think we are sometimes afraid of trusting people with information, but that's one reason why I really believe in environmental education is you give students, especially young students, trust and confidence because they get this information and then they can use it for themselves.
Thank you so much, Ben. Very interesting take from you about this topic. Let's discuss again after this.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Panji. We have also Raja Aritona. We'd like to know more about your Bird of Paradise recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, Raja Aritona, will you speak out?
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm currently working in South Papua as a conservation assistant. This is your presentation. I'm interested in the sound of the bird of paradise. So I want to know how simple the sound of bird singing can explain in the condition of the ecosystem, and then the behavior patterns of these birds. And then many people in indigenous people ingin ingin berburu. Sorry, a little bit.
Tuhan.
Berburu. Nah,
Would like
berburu.
Tuhan.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Some birds eat. Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you for the question. So I couldn't quite hear the end of it, but I think you were speaking about the indigenous connections to birds as part of religious beliefs and practices. But I'll back up to the beginning and speak generally because it's a bit different for every species and sometimes for individuals, but some of the basic techniques for bioacoustics involve, I mentioned passive acoustics and active acoustic monitoring. So active is mostly what I do, where you record the individual, you follow the bird, you wait for it to sing, you record the sound. And that's really good for behavioral studies where, like you remember the spectrogram that I showed, the graph of frequency over time, you can look at those different frequencies and the fundamental and the harmonics, and those harmonics actually reflect the physical size and shape and movement of the vocal cords or the syrinx in the case of a songbird. And those mechanics reflect the morphology of the animal and can teach you a lot about the way that language is constructed. Because sometimes our ears get exhausted listening to this stuff, but if you can spot patterns that teach you how a bird constructs its song, and sometimes you can distinguish individual species based on very subtle differences in the visual spectrogram, like the space between different frequencies and the fundamental can actually reflect morphological differences that are, especially in cryptic animals, sometimes the delineating factors from one species to the next. So you can hear species differences. On a passive acoustic or ecosystem monitoring level, things like species richness and biodiversity are just classic measures. And we use a lot of, in my lab at Cornell, we use a lot of artificial intelligence programming to scan through these spectrograms and try to detect different signals. And those can be barometers of ecosystem health, particularly when measured over time. It's important that you account for confounding variables, everything from human encroachment to differences in the weather can make a difference in how things sound. But some of the studies I've done have related to comparing dawn choruses over time in a fixed location. And there are some famous studies that are not my own that focus on things like selective logging practices. So when you are harvesting trees from a forest, you may still see lots of trees in the forest, but if you listen before and after, you can hear the difference. And so that's one example of how the condition of an ecosystem is described through sound.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, sir.
I saw Mas Pujo still there. Prof. Pujo? No, you're not there anymore. Okay. Let me check. Yes, yeah. The last question from Oluwasen. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's already answered. Okay. Yes. So let me call anybody who would like to ask more question for Ben. Okay, it seems no more question. Okay, thanks, Ben. I think this is a very interesting research that you have done, and we would like to know more about particularly I think I also have similar interest with Panji, how this curriculum will be fit in the future, whether will be integrated into formal curriculum, or do you think it will be rather more on informal curriculum that will be
Right.
interesting for the future? Because it seems that the student already had a lot of what do you call load work for their study. So if this additional study or additional curriculum will give more what do you call chilling rather than pressing, that will be good for them to give a bit release for them on the study load for the student. So yeah, we are looking forward for your result of your study, and yeah, wish you success for your study and also your research. And yeah, maybe later on we'll have a chance to have a discussion with you again. And I would like to invite all participants to give a big applause to Ben for a very nice presentation and also discussion. And I think we will end the meeting, but I would like to just ask my student who joined in this presentation would like to stay to have a not presentation, to feel the presence of their join of this meeting. And yeah, for those who are not my student, you may leave the meeting, and I would like to thanks to everybody. And yeah, thank you, and again see you next time. And yeah, Ben, let me
Yeah.
share screen. Yeah.
Sure. Pa, if I may ask, could we take a group photo? Could people turn their cameras on just for
Oh yeah,
one
yeah,
quick
yeah.
photo?
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So
All right.
please open your camera and make a group photo, everybody. Before leaving. Oh, we have
Yeah.
one love as well.
People are leaving. Oh no, no photo.
Oh, no.
Got some people here.
Yeah, please open your video. Not everybody.
Not everybody.
Okay, just you have list of participant, but you have also list of participant. Yeah.
Yep.
Give me
Yep.
resource.
No problem. Okay.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Gadjah.
Thanks.
Thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Pa, I can make you the co-host of
Yeah.
this call,
Okay.
so you can co-host.
Just okay, please.